Divorce happens. In fact, it happens to almost 50% of first marriages. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Divorce Happens, a podcast to educate, inspire, support, and yes, make you laugh through divorce and beyond so that you can start fresh on the next phase of your journey. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh.
You'll get divorced. You'll get divorced.
Getting divorced?
I'm getting a divorce.
You're getting a divorce.
Because she's getting a divorce.
So what if I get divorced?
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Divorce Happens, the podcast where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, inspiration, and a little bit of laughter. Because as we know, divorce happens and then you start fresh. And we're here with one of our Fresh Starts experts, Tamar. Tamar, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Tamar Barbash. I am the founder of New Beginnings Breakup and Divorce Coaching. I coach people through their divorces. I love what you said about the beginning, the middle, like through the whole thing. So I work with people from when they decide they want to get divorced or their partner decides they want to get divorced through the whole process, figuring out how they want to get divorced, what choices they want to make, really letting them explore and get clarity in their situation so they can make intentional choices and not just kind of like go with the flow and react. And through like the end of their divorces and what comes next.
I love that. I say all the time, having a coach like you on your side during a divorce, not only does it save you a lot of money, which people don't realize, but it saves you a lot of headache too, because you become just like the bestie that's going to help them through all of this, which I love.
Yeah, and it's a very emotional experience. And so having a coach can really help you get out of the reactive, making decisions based on your emotions and really thinking through, being pragmatic, being intentional about the choices that you're making so that everybody benefits, especially your children.
Love that. Okay, so I'm really excited to have you here today because we're actually talking about something we haven't talked about in our almost 100 episodes, which I'm shocked that we haven't, but I'm glad you're here. So one reason some people may consider divorce is infidelity within the marriage. And I this is not something I experienced myself, but I know I have a lot of friends who have. What happens? I guess let's take it back to the beginning here, Tamar. Like, let's say that you, and I'm just going to use generalizations because this is who often uses Fresh Starts, is just let's say you're a woman and you find out that there's been infidelity in your marriage. What are some of those first steps that you should take to figure out what you want to do next?
Okay. So the answer to that for me is ask more questions. I think, and also ask the right questions. So often when people approach this, what I hear them asking is, can my marriage survive this? Can we get back trust? Like all of these, like, is this possible? And so my answer to can we survive this is we can do anything, right? The only thing required to survive this is not file for divorce. But whether that means that you're thriving, that you're in the kind of relationship that you deserve and want to be in is really the question. So what I want people to think about isn't can we get this back or can we do this? It's why do I want to? Why do I want to save this marriage? Why does it feel like I have to work really hard now to get this back on track? And often the answer to those questions is these limiting beliefs that we come to the table with. And so what I really encourage people to think about is, are you falling back on a preconceived notion that you have in your mind about what marriage is supposed to look like, what vows mean, what we're supposed to do? Or is there a real benefit to you to staying in this relationship? And if there is, what are those benefits? And let's find them. And oftentimes people really struggle to find those benefits. And it really comes down to, well, we took vows. Or, I really believe that kids should have two parents in one home, or things like that we hold on to as these like really intense beliefs that aren't necessarily serving us or providing us with the best life that we can live. And so I just encourage people, so much of what I do is encourage people to ask themselves questions and then be really, really honest with the way that they answer them.
I have like a dumb question, but I'm going to just assume that if there's infidelity within a marriage, the marriage probably wasn't in the best of places to begin with? Is that true, or is maybe that's not
So
true?
often that is the case. I think part of the struggle there is that people are very good at living in like a mild sense of delusion or denial a lot of the time. And so that may be true, but until the infidelity comes out, they were able to turn a blind eye to it or pretend things were okay. And now it becomes harder to do that. And so that's another question is, okay, so now the door's been, blown wide open on this. Let's really take stock of where this relationship was, and were you getting what you need out of it? Or were there other things that were missing all along that now we can really take a hard look at and be honest about?
But that's really hard to do by yourself, right? So I recommend reaching out to somebody like you, right? And say, and like, what would a woman say when they email you or call you, and like, let's say they come to me and they're like, Olivia, I just found out my husband's cheating on me. What do I do? And I'm like, go reach out to Tamar. What do they say when they reach out to you?
So as I said, a lot of people are just wondering, like they want to hear success stories of people who made it work after this. And truth be told, it's very hard to know how many of those there are because people are dishonest about what's going on in their homes all the time, right? So to really get to the truth of it, I can tell you that I've certainly worked with people and I've heard stories from people who did go, who did make it work for a while. And then after 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, like it crumbles anyway, because the trust is so eroded that it really is so hard. But there was such an intense desire to make it work for all of these reasons that now they're 6 years in. Those are 6 years they could have had rebuilding, starting a new life, starting a new path that they now have to start over 6 years later. So that doesn't always happen, but it's certainly something that I think is worth considering. There's two things that I think I really want to like kind of drive home here. One is kids. And I think that, one of the things people hold on to is this idea that kids should be in a home with both of their parents. And I really push back, especially with infidelity, and especially when kids are old enough to be paying attention and knowing what's going on the idea that like, what are you telling your kids as far as what a relationship is supposed to look like? What behaviors are acceptable within a relationship? What behaviors are acceptable to live with within a relationship? If you have young daughters, if you have young sons, like what are they learning about how they're supposed to treat their partners and what they're allowed to accept from their partners? And so it's sort of cliched, but I think a lot of people often say like, well, if this was your daughter, what would you want her to do? And I do think it's a question worth asking oneself.
I love
So
that. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, keep going.
So that's one of the things. And the second thing that I really, really, really want to talk about is what I call the sunk cost fallacy of marriage, right? Which in finance, the sunk cost fallacy, or in business, is that you've put in a lot of money into a project, and so you can't imagine calling it quits, even though you're not seeing any return on your investment because you've already invested so much. And so people keep investing more in a failing proposition because they've already invested so much, and the idea of cutting their losses just seems like I can't commit to a loss like that, even though ultimately they're going to lose more if they keep investing. And so in the space of a marriage, this is what I think of when people say, but we have so much history. And I think that is something that people fall back on all the time. Like, how can I leave this man? We have so much history. And the answer is that the investment that you've put in thus far has nothing to do with the return on that investment that you're going to see in the future. And sometimes, even with all that you've put in, the best way to make sure you don't lose significantly more is to cut your losses and walk away.
Mm. I really love what you said, is why do you want to save this marriage? I think that that's a really, really hard question.
Right.
And I think you're probably right. I didn't have infidelity, but I had definitely there was emotional infidelity, I would say, and a split in the marriage. And I remember thinking like, this isn't the marriage that we used to have, right? And so I do agree that sometimes, especially with the busyness of life and kids and stuff, you suppress, right? All of that like stuff that's going on. And then when something comes up like this, then you kind of like, I feel like walk into the tornado, right? You're like, okay. So how do you work with women if you truly can't decide what to do, right? If you're like, do I stay? Do I go? Do I work on this? How does the support from you help them process all of that?
Okay. Well, the first thing is that you don't have to make that decision today, right? You can come to me and you cannot be sure, and you can live in that space of not
Mm,
being sure
that's so
for as
scary.
long as you need to. Absolutely, but it's your life. So if you're not sure, like, you don't have to wake up tomorrow and say, "I'm making the decision, I'm staying," or "I'm making the decision, I'm going." You can say, "I'm making the decision to take it one day at a time. I'm making the decision to see what my partner does in these next few weeks and months, and to see if I see glimmers of who he used to be or who I think he is, and make the decision then." You're not required to decide anything, and if you feel pressure from your spouse to kind of give you that answer, you can push back on that, because the reason you're in this position is because of choices they made. So now they can have patience and allow you to process this in whatever time frame you need to process it, and come to a decision when you come to it. But there is no pressure to, like, figure this out immediately.
Mm,
And the only thing that I think is required, which, as you said, is extremely difficult, is being honest with ourselves. And so that's why, like, one of the things I do is sort of serve as a mirror. It's like, I'm going to just reflect back to you all the emotions and all the things you're telling me you feel. And you let me know if that sounds like a relationship that's worth saving or not. But
right.
don't shy away from the fact that you feel betrayed, that you feel angry, that you feel that there's no trust left. And, so all of those things. And I do think, to the question of why people stay, I think societally, there is a lot of pressure and this big idea that, like, the most noble thing we can do is save our marriages. So the people, if you can put in the work and you can, rise above, and 5 years from now look back and say, we got through that, that there's something incredibly honorable about that. And what I tell people is, it's wonderful to be able to save your marriage, but not if you're sacrificing yourself in the process. So
Right.
saving yourself is actually far more significant and important than saving your marriage. So what are you sacrificing in order to make this marriage work? And also, what are you telling your spouse as far as what you are willing to forgive and put up with, and what happens if it happens again? And people say, well, I'm going to put my foot down and I'm going to say, if this happens again, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But I can't tell you how many people say that to begin with. If
Right.
if you cheat on me, I'm going to leave. I'm going to take the kids. I'm going to do this. And one thing I also want to say to people is, if you feel like you need to put out a threat to stop your spouse from cheating on you, it's probably time to walk away, because your spouse should not be cheating on you because they're not interested in cheating on you and they're committed to your marriage, not because they're afraid you're going to take their children away. So, I think the questions people have to ask themselves are what they want out of a relationship, what they deserve out of a relationship, and then be honest about whether they were getting those things, honestly, before the infidelity even became a thing.
Right.
And now that it has, if they believe they're going to get those things going forward with this partner.
Right. And that's really hard to do. So I would assume, as a coach and like a counselor, you have good questions that will help bring those honest answers up in people, because I could totally see even myself being like, no, we were fine. We were totally fine. Like, everything was great. Right. And we're just going to keep going. But it's not the truth of the matter. So how do you work with people? Like, what kind of support do you give them? Let's say that a woman decides to seek divorce, right? She's like, this is not, I can't go back from this. What kind of support do you give them, like, generally speaking?
So it really depends on where they are and what they're looking for. And so one of the first questions I ask is, what are you hoping to get out of this relationship? What is it that you're coming to me for? What do you need support through?
Mhm.
So that gives me some guidance. It can be any number of things. I love to educate people about the different ways to get divorced. I think people often think that, you picture divorce, you picture bitter battles and anger and contention and court and all those things. And there really are options that don't involve any of that people don't know about. There's mediation, there's
Mhm.
collaborative divorce, which is a process I'm learning more and more about, that I think is, like, really worth people learning about. So I can do that. I can kind of walk them through the steps. I always advise, like, putting a team together, like
Mhm.
having your support, having financial support, having, like, all the things. And then it really depends. Like, sometimes people just need me to be a cheerleader and to remind them that they can do this and that they're going to be okay. Sometimes it's more pragmatic and practical support, and, like, let's really figure out what the next steps are. So it really depends on what people are looking for.
To go back to something you said before, if there's somebody that is taking it day by day and deciding, like, I love that you said, like, you don't have to, I'm the person that would be like, no, I have to make a decision right now. Is the language on how you express that to your partner something you could work with people on?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I
Yeah.
could feel like that'd be very confusing for people.
Yes. I spend a lot of time actually working with people on like, how do I say this? I want to tell him that I'm leaving. I want to tell her that I'm doing
Right.
this. How do I do that? What can I say? And again, I don't give the answers, but
Right.
I ask a lot of questions in terms of, well, what do you want to accomplish with this conversation? What are you looking to do with this? Why are you approaching this? And then what are the things you can say that will get you to that end goal? And so we work together to craft that and make sure that whatever the goals are, the way that we're wording it and saying it is going to lead us or hopefully lead us to that place.
I love that. Okay, so if someone's listening to this and they have experienced infidelity in their marriage, what would you say is the first action step they should take to figure everything out?
I would make a list of all the things. The way I would make a list of the cons of staying, the pros of staying, what the benefits are of this relationship, what you're getting out of this relationship, what you're not getting out of this relationship. I also think that this is an opportunity if you want to go the route of repair, if that's something
Mhm.
that's important to you, then this is an opportunity to come to the table and start fresh and kind of say, okay, if we're going to do this, X, Y, and Z were actually already bothering me before we got to this
Right.
place. And now if we're going to make a go at this, well, here's a list of the things that weren't working for me anyway. You
Right.
weren't taking out the trash or like these are the things that now are going to have to get fixed
Right.
in addition to, the trust and all of that. But
Right.
also like real work is required to repair if that is where people are going. So unless you are fully prepared,
Yeah.
get a therapist who's going to work with both of you and to both of you be in individual therapy,
Mhm.
then there's to me, there's very little chance. It's not impossible to stay together, but there's very little chance that you will have the kind of relationship that is
Right.
worth staying together for if
Mm.
you're not willing to put in a significant amount of work.
Oh,
And
I
so
love
that's
that.
also the question is the amount of work that is going to be required here worth it? And that's where the sunk cost fallacy sort of comes in. Like,
Mhm.
or should we just sort of call it a day and realize that if this has happened, it's probably a sign or it may be a sign that things just aren't where they should be and it's time to walk away.
Yeah, and I just want to validate, like, anytime you decide to end a marriage, it's a hard decision, right? Like, it's never really like an easy, whether it's just that you grew apart or that there was infidelity, it's always tricky to know what to do
Totally.
because you do put time and energy into it. Like you said, I love that you compare it to a business like that. Um, yeah, what were you gonna say?
Just it is always a tough decision, and I think societally, we, like, make people feel really bad about it no matter what the circumstances are, but I also think, like, the hard decisions aren't necessarily the wrong decisions, and that's just
Yeah.
really important to remember.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said take your time too, because I think that we're always rushing to get to a decision in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
super important.
it's important to try and get this right and to, like, do what's best for you, and that's really, like, if I could drive home one question, it's like, "How is this benefiting me? How do I" like,
Mhm.
and I asked a woman that recently, like, "What" "Give me the reasons that you're staying, like, how does this relationship benefit you?" And every answer she gave me benefited her husband.
Mhm.
And there was, like, secondary benefit, right? Like, she's a very generous person, so taking care of him, like, gave her, like, satisfaction
Right.
but that's not an actual benefit to her, right? Like,
Yeah.
he needs me is not a benefit to you,
That's a whole other episode, Tamar.
right? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in working with you?
So the easiest way is through my website, which is nbdivorcecoaching.com. The NB is for new beginnings.
Mhm.
That's the same. It's everywhere. It's the same. So on Instagram, NB Divorce Coaching. My email address is tamar@nbdivorcecoaching.com. So I'm reachable in all of those places. And I'd love to work with anybody who's looking for support.
Amazing. And tomorrow's Fresh Starts info will be in the show notes as well. So you can click that link and get in touch with her with one button, which is great. Before we let you go, if somebody's listening to this going through a divorce or considering a divorce, what would be some words of encouragement you could leave them with?
Getting divorced sucks, but being divorced is amazing. And there are so many opportunities that are waiting for you at the end of this challenging time. But this is a temporary part of the rest of your life. And what lies ahead has endless possibilities.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to have you back on to talk about all the other things. Thanks, Tamar. Divorce Happens is produced by Fresh Starts Registry, the only divorce registry platform for everything you need to begin again, including home items, hype team, and everything in between. Remember, divorce happens, and then we start fresh. We're here to support you before, during, and after divorce. Head to freshstartsregistry.com for more info.